What is it like to be a hospice chaplain? Let's talk about a day in the life. If you're new here, my name is Leslie, and I am taking you on my journey to becoming a chaplain. I am creating the types of videos that I was looking for 2 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago now, when I started this journey. So welcome, like, subscribe, so that you don't miss out. All right, so let's talk about what it's like to be a hospice chaplain. So I did all of my clinical pastoral education like most chaplains do inside of a hospital. But when it came time to find work, I found it much easier to get a job as a hospice chaplain. And I'm going to make another video about, is hospice chaplaincy better than hospital chaplaincy or vice versa? But I can tell you this, that if you're starting out, it'll be a lot easier for you to get a job as a hospice chaplain, and we'll chat about that as we go on. So the first thing is, what is it like? So it depends on the type of hospice company that you work for, and you really want to be careful, y'all. I am blessed in the regard that I work for a really good company that gives their full-time employees great benefits, and they are very concerned about work-life balance and things of that nature. So they keep our census low. A census is basically how many patients you have, okay? And how far do you need to travel to get to see those people? So I am a part-time hospice chaplain. So for me, a full census is considered 25 to 30 patients. And so anything higher than that, so if you were full-time, just double that, right? So a full census would be 50 to 60 patients, and 60 patients would be really high. Now get this, come real close. I know some people who work for hospice companies where their census as a full-time employee was over 100 people. That's a lot, especially when you think about the fact that you're supposed to see patients once to twice a month, if they're allowing you to see them. And then once they go into the actively dying phase, they want you to see them every week, okay? So think about, you got 100 people, that math don't even math, right? So you know that's just wild. And traveling back and forth and all of that, insane. So anywho, so that's the big thing, is you want to make sure that you work for a company that has a decent census. You want a manageable patient load. I start my morning after I do all of my devotional things. I start my morning by checking my little tablet to see what new patients sales has brought in. And they've been processed, they've signed their agreement and all of that. So I'm checking to see how many new patients I have that have been added to my census. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing I do is we jump on a huddle. Every morning we have a very short huddle that kind of reiterates what I think I saw on my tablet, because sometimes there is administrative things that happen. So we're seeing what new patients we've taken on. Also, equally as important, what patients have died. And if there were any calls that came in overnight. One of the beautiful things about hospice is that patients have 24-hour access to a nurse. So if something is going on, medicine, something strange that's happening, you have the comfort of knowing that you can reach out to our 800 number and get a nurse. Well, it's important for me as a chaplain to know if one of my patients' families called, or if something's going on, I might need to follow up with a phone call as well, because that may be causing some type of spiritual distress to that family, right? And I'm here to help manage spiritual distress. So we want to know what new patients we have. We want to know who's died and if there's been any calls that have come in, okay? So now let's talk about, what do I do when I get a new? So when you get a new patient inside of hospice, you have 5 days to contact those patients according to Medicaid, Medicare rules. So you must make contact with that patient within 5 days. And guess what? It's not 5 business days. It's 5 days. So if you get a patient on a Tuesday, those weekend days count, okay? And you can see, while that doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you're one of those hospice companies where your census is really large, you can see how that could become a problem very quickly, trying to meet that 5-day deadline. So that is the first thing that I'm trying to do, is see how many new patients do I have, looking at my schedule to see who I already have on the schedule, and when am I going to be able to make phone calls to those new patient families to attempt to get a visit. All right. So once I look at my schedule, see who I'm trying to see, based off of what I'm doing and in terms of my caseload and how far I like to drive, as a part-timer, I usually don't see any more than 3 patients a day. The only time I will see more than 3 patients a day is if they are in some type of nursing home. If they are in a nursing home, I can see more people because they're consolidated, right? They're all in the same building. I can go from room to room. But if I'm going from home to home, typically no more than 3 people. And so once I've plotted out my day and my week based off of those new patients, I start my phone calls for the day. So my phone calls, I typically try to do bereavement phone calls. So if one of my patients passed and I find out about it in that daily huddle, I try to make those phone calls first thing, just to offer my condolences and to see if they need any additional support. Because some families will have you officiate the funeral or the memorial service. Obviously, you want to pray. You want to continue to be some emotional and spiritual support now that their loved one has passed on, and a resource to them in general. And typically they know what funeral home and all of those things, because that's a part of the process of getting signed up on hospice. But every now and then people need help with that. So I try to make my bereavement calls first thing. After my bereavement calls, typically I'm on my way to my first patient's home. Okay. There are 2 types of visits that most hospice chaplains have. One is a new start visit, and the other is just a continuous visit, right? Like you're continuing to see those patients until they pass away. And so the first visit, which is your initial visit, is the longest visit with the patient or the patient's family. Because remember, sometimes when people are in hospice, a lot of them have dementia, advanced dementia, so they can't speak for themselves, right? So sometimes you're talking to the patient, sometimes you're talking to the patient and their family, sometimes you're strictly talking to the patient. Just depends on the condition of the patient when they come onto your service line. So that first initial start of care meeting, what I am doing there is I am putting together a plan of care based off of my assessment of that patient in terms of what are their spiritual needs and how often do I think I need to meet with them and the types of conversations I anticipate having to meet that spiritual need. Okay. And so that very first meeting, and I'm going to do a part 2 to this video, but that very first meeting is really getting to know the story. So the life review, them sharing who they are, or if it's the family, what is your mom or dad? What were they like? What do you need me to know about them? So it's getting to know them. It's rapport building, right? And I'm also trying to assess, though, is there anything that feels like the patient may feel like they haven't done yet? Right? Like there's some things that they regret not doing. There's some loose ends that they might want to tie up. That might be the 4 things. There's this wonderful book called The 4 Things. And this book basically summarizes the 4 things that most people need to do before they're dying to have a good death or a clear conscience or whatever you might believe your belief system may be. And this is not the particular order, but here are the 4 things. You want to say thank you to people. Like, who do you need to say thank you to? Who do you need to say I forgive you to? Who do you need to ask, will you forgive me? And the 4th thing is what we commonly think of is I love you, right? Telling people that you love them. And so when I'm talking about, are there things that are left unsaid that patient may be wrestling with. I'm kind of using those 4 pillars to kind of guide that conversation, right? So they can start to process some of that spiritual and emotional baggage that they may be carrying around. I'm also assessing for, is there fear or anxiety around dying, right? Some people are very afraid to die. Some people are very anxious because they don't know what's going to happen when they die. I'm trying to figure out if there's some theological beliefs that are no longer helpful to them, or theological beliefs that could be fleshed out more that would be a bigger support to them. So I'm asking questions about, what do they believe about the afterlife? How are they feeling about God or spirit in this moment? And does that provide any comfort or solace to them in this time? So I'm trying to help them uncover what I call spiritual coping tools, because this is a big adjustment. You're dying. This is a new stage in life. And some people die with a bunch of anxiety and angst, but those people who die well are typically people who have spiritual coping tools that they can access when the chaplain ain't around, when your family's not around. What tools can you access that brings you peace and solace? So that is the major thing that I'm trying to assess for. There's okay, what existential questions may they have? Those sorts of things, so that they can ask those questions in a non-judgmental space. I am a non-anxious presence holding non-judgmental space. People tell you all kinds of stuff as a chaplain, especially when they're dying. I've had people confess some pretty heinous things, okay, that either they did or things that happened to them, right? It's a lot. It's a lot when people are dying. And so they're questioning, what was the purpose of my life? What kind of legacy am I going to live? But that big one was what did I even come here to do this for? Why did I even spend 90 years on this earth? Those are big questions. And people are looking to chaplains to companion them through those types of questions. Yeah. So this is kind of part 1 of what I do as a hospice chaplain. I hope it helps you. I think there's some other things, and I'll rewatch this after I finish it and see if a part 2 is needed. I think it is, because I feel like I left out some other things. I want to talk about a recertification visit. I want to talk about declines, how do you know when someone's dying, and the role that the chaplain plays in that, because it's not just the nurse's job to determine that person is dying. So I want to talk about how I can tell, or you can tell as a chaplain, that someone's declining. So yeah, I'll definitely do a part 2. If this was helpful, please share, comment. It's so helpful to this channel that I'm trying to grow. And if you have any questions, because this was actually a question that was asked by someone in my chats, I will answer them, okay? Because I want to spread the truth about what it is to be a chaplain. All right, friends, until next time, grace and peace.